Hey, how you doing? Are you hanging in there? Okay, we're it's a sprint right now to Starfield. Just hang in there. We can do this. We can avoid leaks. We can do. I see you looking. Look, I know it looks like I lost a bet. I didn't. Somehow I chose this military-esque mustache. I think all guys who grow facial hair at some point want to see why they always have facial hair. And then once they shave, they're like, oh, yeah, that's right. So I'm at that phase. I know it's a little awkward. I'll be back to, oh God, I just feel so naked. I'll be back to my normal self in a week. I'll stay strong. But seriously, I want to thank you guys so much for getting me to 500 subscribers before the release of Starfield. I got my first little partnership thing. I'm not planning to do anything with it right now. It's just nice to have that goalpost. So the next one's 1,000. Thank you guys again. And if you want to know more of my post Starfield plans, I'm going to say some things after the video. And if you're not interested, cool. There's still great content between me and Gath. And on that, so this being the last interview before Starfield, I wanted to give you the legend and the man who suffered through teaching me the CK, Mr. Kinggath himself. SS2, he's done workshop framework. If that isn't enough, he has a bunch of videos on teaching the creation kit. And sadly, I didn't know this. He has a podcast with about 50 episodes of him talking to mod authors, as well as even Juicehead. So I've been listening to that. And I suggest you do the same. I'll leave a link down below. But we talked for quite a bit, and I don't want to delay you any further, so, let's freaking dive into it. Hey, what's up, Kinggath?
Good evening. Now, did not expect Hotfix season to go a month long. It was going to be like 2 weeks at most. Better to be hotfixing and leave people who walk away from Fallout 4 for a couple months with a good memory.
Right. Going to be a limited time to get their memory back after Starfield.
Right. I want people to walk away like being happy with the story, and then when I put out a patch trailer or something to lure people back, that they're remembering it with fondness and not all the bugs.
Has it been more bugs on PC or more bugs on Xbox?
Oh, it's always more on Xbox, just because there's a lot of files that are removed on there. So then inevitably they're like watching people play on PC. Like, I don't have that. It's like, yeah, that's because we had to cut it, man. You don't have enough space. Bethesda left you guys high and dry. But it's also hard for us to fix things that are specific to Xbox because you can't run any debug reports. So. But most of the issues are because we have so many choices in the quest line that you'll be going down like one path. You'll answer some inane question to Jake, and it'll turn out that it had consequences, and then you'll get the wrong consequences playing out for you, and so then people are confused, like, why did that just happen? The dialogue trees were so complicated that we made a lot of mistakes.
Interesting. I heard some rumors about like them opening up some more space possibly when Starfield release for their mods.
So there's a public Bethesda Discord server, and they stated in there that it's very, very difficult to add more mod space for Fallout. It basically would force all current players to reinstall the game, because I guess the space that's allocated on your hard drive is done when you install the game. So if they were to request to fix that, then everybody who's got Fallout 4 on their Xbox would suddenly have to reinstall, and that's not good user experience. And most people don't use any mods, right? The vast majority of players are not mod users, so you're asking them to all of a sudden uninstall for no benefit. I thought it would be a good idea to do it at the time when they do the remaster or whatever they're calling it, the next gen version. Like, that seemed like an obvious time. Like, people are gonna that's an upgrade that would be worthy of a reinstall, right? So
yeah, more worthy than just paying $20 for them to break all your mods.
Yeah.
First question I usually ask is, I know you're busy, but what games are you playing right now, if any?
Playing games.
Yeah, I know. Well, the last game you played.
Yeah, the last game I played, let me think. I mean, this is how it's funny that you would think that they would stand out in my head because I play so infrequently, but instead I always struggle. So I actually play a lot of games with my kids. The last game I played was an hour before we got on this call. I was playing Minecraft with my son, which is so much fun because I never got into Minecraft. For me, Minecraft didn't make any sense. It came out after I was an adult already, right? Like, how long ago did that come out?
Oh God,
15 years ago. It's maybe 20 years ago. It's an old game now, like maybe not 20, I don't know, but it definitely came out like at a point in my life where I didn't have the free time to play an open sandbox game like that. Like, that requires a different mindset than a game with a narrative that takes you through it. And I didn't get it. It didn't click for me, even though it's one of the most popular, if not the most popular game on the planet. And now that I'm playing with my kid, I get it. Like, it's a lot of fun.
It's kind of a team thing, isn't it? Like solo by yourself is kind of...
Yeah, it definitely feels better multiplayer because then at least you're just playing with somebody, right? Like just in the most childlike sense of you're just goofing around. Whereas when I'm playing a game by myself, which is generally how I game, I need a purpose. I need some sort of objective. And they don't really give you one in Minecraft. It's just kind of like, here you are, here's some trees you can punch, and you figure it out on your own from there.
I'm kind of the same way. I need that narrative. It's hard for me to get into it. I need some sort of goal that I could pretend I'm reaching
right
while jacking around.
Well, and a lot of those games, they say like you do kind of figure out the objective when you're talking to other people or watching videos. Like technically in Minecraft, the goal is to beat the Ender Dragon. But if you never consumed any media, you would never find that out. Like you would not accidentally stumble upon the Ender Dragon. Like that's not a thing. It's from what I gather. I could be totally wrong, but from as much as I have played, because I did give it the old college try when it came out, and now that I'm playing with my kid, I still see no sign of like there's nothing guiding me forward other than my kid asks questions and then we go explore it. Like I don't know what that does. Let's go check it out. And so it's a very interesting way to experience a game. But yeah, I like the narrative, and that's why I think Bethesda RPGs appeal to me. And when I'm answering a question you haven't even asked, but it feels like I'm setting myself up to answer a question. Like with Sim Settlements, it started out as a systems game, but then as it got deeper and deeper, it was like, okay, well, we need a tutorial for this. And the best tutorials to me that I've ever played are always in games like the old story-based RTS games where you have a story driving you forward, so you have a purpose for what you're doing, and then you get introduced to mechanics, and that's how we ended up at SS2.
And so when you started, it was first SS, just the first Sim Settlements iteration, which was just the buildings essentially building themselves. When did you start SS2? Pretty soon after that, or?
Yeah, I mean, it was basically born out of the popularity of SS1. So it was like, I didn't expect the insanity that SS1 became. The story I always tell about it is that in the first couple of months after Sim Settlements came out, it literally took up the equivalent of a full-time job to reply to all the comments and DMs I was getting. It was just outrageous, between like help questions or like, this is, just like, oh, this is such a great thing, thank you. Bug reports, or eventually it was people asking if they could help. It was just nonstop for months. Like literally, it was like, wait, if I didn't have help, that's all I would have been doing was answering questions. And some days it is all I did. Now I've taken a step back from that because
you want to live a life.
Well, I want to live a life, but I was still, that's the thing is it was full time in the sense of like all my free time. So it was like after the kids go to bed, start answering messages. And then at lunch, I'm sneaking in questions. And I wanted to also have some of that free time for developing the mod or actually fixing some of these bugs and not just telling people how to work around them. So now we've got a lot of people in the community that help out with reports. And so I kind of get the filtered version of like, here's the actual things you need to work on, as opposed to like all the immediate questions. It's more like other people do the filtering level of, all right, let's make sure this is actually a problem with the mod, not a mod conflict. Let's make sure this isn't just person not knowing what they're doing or not reading the instructions. And then so I get the actual problems. But SS2 was, it basically exists because of that initial popularity. So I've been modding for a long time, and I've been on big mod teams, and I know they tend to fail. It's just like the average team fails, and you can see that
the overhaul type thing.
The overhaul type thing, exactly. That's usually what they're called in the older games. Now, I don't know what people call them in the Bethesda field, but it seems to be like new world space mods is what they tend to be called, I guess, where people are basically trying to create Fallout 5 or Elder Scrolls 6 on their own, and that's a freaking tall order. Like look at something like Fallout 4. Which is not that big a world, and took a team of 100 several years to build it. So, it's a lot.
And how long did Sim Settlements take?
Well, Sim Settlements is nothing compared to the base game. You know what I mean? Like we have I think our story eclipses the base game in scope and length, but we didn't have to build the world, right? We didn't have to build all the structures and the decorations and everything. So we had a lot less work to do. But we are on, this is, if you include SS1, because a lot of the mechanics were fleshed out during SS1. A lot of the buildings reported directly over. It's closing in on 7 years of development now.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. I've never had a project last this long in my life. This is wild. But it's also like it's enjoyable, or I wouldn't still be doing it. So, but yeah, SS2. I keep like not answering your question. I get distracted. So the SS2 came out, or we started working on it right away after SS1 came out. It was like SS1 came out, and then it was super successful in the terms of like that people loved it and wanted more of it. And so I was like, okay, cool. I guess I'm gonna do something else with this. And I had left a big hole in it. So when SS1 came out, we had 4 plot types. It was like residential, agricultural, commercial, and industrial. And industrial, all it had was one building. It was just what we called the scrap heap, which was basically just a big dirt mound buried underneath the plot, and then a bunch of trash on top of it. Like that was it for industrial. And I was like, I always had this idea of like industrial should be way cooler. Let's go bigger with it. So then I made an expansion, which I called Industrial Revolution. And it was just like a whole bunch of industrial plots. And then I threw in martial plot too, because there were a whole lot of people in the community who jumped into the add-on pack creation of adding more buildings to expand it. And a lot of people wanted to do defense things, places for guard posts and artillery. So I was like, okay, well, I ended up coming up with the idea of martial because I just like the naming scheme of agricultural and residential. And I was like, all right, what would be a military
version of that?
Basically, yeah. So it landed on martial. So that got snuck in there too. And then I think recreational as well. I don't remember when recreational got added, but anyways, we ended up on 6 plot types in there. And then around that time, because that went really quick for me. Like I think I built Industrial Revolution in like 3 months or something. It was like on the pace of our development, that was incredibly fast. And it was me, a guy who goes by Del Chupinabre, who does sound, because we have a lot of sound effects in it, and Ethrion, who's done a ton of stuff in the mod community for buildable objects for settlements. And he did a bunch of objects for that, and like some I don't remember if it was him or somebody else who did the animation on this stuff, but it was a very tiny team. Like if you go look at our credits for Industrial Revolution, it's very small. It ended up growing over time because I kept working on Industrial Revolution and adding in quests and stuff, but initially it was just a little tiny squad of us. Del's done a lot of the sounds for all the machinery. So like Industrial Revolution was tons of like animated gadgets and stuff that were on the plots to make them more lively. So during that time, after I was like first inspired by the crowd, then inspired by how quickly I could produce, and I was like, oh, let's take this to the next level. So then I put out these like crazy ideas to the community of like, okay, I've got this vision. I'm going to need a ton of writers. I need a ton of voice actors. I need all these people, and I need settlement designers. And then so I recruited over a very short period of time, like over a month, like 100 people. And so like we just blew up this team to a scale of like nothing that I'd ever worked with, much less managed. And I at least understood that like, okay, well, you can't manage all these people yourself. You're going to need to like assign things to people. So I had to pick a lead for like the writing. And I do remember how I got to him. So we had done during Industrial Revolution a newspaper. So the idea was it would be really cool if you could build a newspaper, and as you completed quests in the game, the newspaper would print articles about what you did. And so I had recruited a bunch of writers early for that. So we had like 6 or 7 writers who were making these newspaper articles. Just, it wasn't anything complicated, but the guys worked really hard on it. And one of the guys, Danger, like coordinated all the writers that we brought on. And then so we pivoted that to like, hey, do any of you guys who did the newspaper want to come work on this next stage? And a few of them did, but Danger had led the charge on the newspaper. So I had him lead the charge on the writers. And we ended up with like 12 or 13 writers, and we tasked them with this idea of, all right, each of you guys pitch 10 characters. And our goal is, let's have it so that as players build up settlements, so they build more plots, they level them up, they invest more in settlements, that they'll attract those characters. Played some games like this before. I can't remember the names of them because I don't feel like any of them did a great job. One was like it was like a Dragon Quest game, and you would build these little towns and like people would come. And I always liked that idea of the number one incentive when I'm playing Bethesda games is quests. I want more dialogue. I want characters who actually care what I'm doing and give me a reason to do stuff. What we were talking about earlier, like without that narrative drive, you're just kind of wasting time, right? Then your head starts getting out of it and you're like, I could be doing something productive right now. But when you're sucked in with a narrative, like that goes out and you're actually, for me, and I'm able to actually immerse myself in and like just let go and, be the character in the game. As long as I've got somebody in the game who's urging me on and they care about what I'm doing.
Right. Like No Man's Sky, having dead NPCs around kind of like it
doesn't work. Right. That's how I feel about, like, that's how 76 was when it first launched. It was like, it looks like a Fallout game. Like I have the same stuff in my inventory as a Fallout game, but like, where's the characters? And then when they put out that Wastelanders thing, like then I actually enjoyed it. But I also it started to feel like MMO, totally. which are like kryptonite for me because they suck my soul. I can't get trapped on that. Days. Yeah. For me, it was World of Warcraft. Just way too many hours burned. I mean, now, ironically, now I've burned way more hours on producing stuff, but I feel like,
but you create,
but at least I'm bringing a lot of other people joy, right? Whereas if I'm playing an MMO, I'm bringing nobody but myself and my guildmates any joy, and now
it's just guilt you would be bringing yourself if it was.
right. So yeah, so SS2 kind of happened by accident. So we set out that goal of those characters, and then within that, when we had so many writers, we're like, okay, well, I would also love to do a tutorial quest. Like, let's have like a story-driven quest. And I always use Warcraft 3 and Starcraft as my golden example of like a brilliant way to like tell an intriguing story while teaching a systems game. And so I said, I want that. I want our Warcraft 3 or we want our Thrall story or our Jim Raynor story. So I asked a couple of the writers to tackle. Well, actually, I told Danger, I was like, here's my rough pitch for the story. Like, I didn't have any plot details. It was more like, ironically, I said plot. Any details, but it was more like, here's the mechanics that I want to make sure it addresses. And here are some like broad ideas. It was like, hey, let's make sure that we send them all over the game world, because if our quest is sending them all over, they'll get to do stuff in the rest of the game and they'll find the settlements, etc. So I had really loose ideas. And then it was like, whatever else you guys want to do with the story. So I am not, I don't like getting credit for the story stuff, because mostly I'm just there in the meetings to make sure that that we're teaching people stuff. And other than that, it's all the writers on our team who come up with all the good story and the good dialogue and everything. And so we had 2 guys work on the story. Then we just marched forward. And during all this time, I was just developing systems. And so, we'd have meetings every week or every 2 weeks and kind of make sure everybody on the team was heading in the right direction. And it was taking forever, because it was this crazy goal of let's do a big main story and these 100 characters. But they were slowly getting chipped away out of between. It was like the different writing phases, and making character faces in the game so that we could put them in because we have tools to make the characters in the game, and then we extract those from the save files. Mm-hmm. And then during all this, and this was literally years of them working on this, I got to a point where I realized the SimSettlements code base that I had created was rubbish. Like, it just was no good. It was too slow. It was it wasn't going to let us. We were going to hit a brick wall of just like, the code can't run fast enough to be enjoyable. Like, it's just going to be too clunky and too miserable to play if I keep adding more stuff on it. So I had to start rewriting it all from scratch. And then the choice was either we do a big patch and tell everyone they start new saves, or we take this opportunity to rebrand, because it's a total overhaul. Like, we weren't just improving the code. We changed the game, the core of it, pretty massively. Like you said, SS1 was all about just automated building, and everything was free. And now we've got like actual like costs and a tech tree that like you get to higher level buildings over time. So it's a very different experience, even though like fundamentally the idea was the same of you place down little tiles of land and the settlers do the rest of the building. Like, that fundamental bit still exists in some settlements too, but otherwise it's quite a different experience.
Interesting. When did Sir Rick join onto the team? When did Danger switch? Because I don't think I ever.
Yeah, so Danger exited before we finished the project, but the two that he gave the main quest project to were Poet and Son of Soul Reaver. And Poet had to exit for personal reasons, and he told us he was leaving. Danger had just left one day; he just didn't show up anymore. I think he had his own stuff going on, but that's how it rolls. And this is something I had become accustomed to working on mods all my life, is when you get in these big teams of volunteers, like, some people just don't attach and they just kind of ghost. Tis the way, for better or for worse. I wish people wouldn't do that. I wish people would say something, but
communicate it.
Yeah, just tell me what's going on, man. That's okay. We don't owe each other anything other than a little common courtesy. And then Poet left, and so we needed a teammate for Soul Reaver, because it was a big job. It's too much for one person to write. And Sir Rick I had recruited at some point, because we started putting quests in Industrial Revolution. We had already worked with some voice actors, and we had worked with some voice actors for all those characters, because all those characters, the 100 pack we started with, were being produced all this time. So we had a guy named Shadow Puppet who was doing direction. Dell was doing some audio processing. Like, we had all this stuff in a slow pipeline being produced. So we worked with a lot of voice actors at this point. And Sir Rick had emailed me and said, like, hey, I voiced, these characters. If you've got any use for additional writing help, I'm pretty good with a pen. I've got So I don't know if this is exactly what he said. I'm putting words in his mouth, but I've got some time and I think I'm pretty good. So I was like, okay, great. So I gave him a little project to try out. I had some writing that was going to go into a quest that I wasn't really happy with. And I think it was from one of the writers who had left. So I was like, I'll let him punch it up. And he did a fantastic job. I couldn't even tell you what it was at this point, but he did a great job. And it was like, oh, this is so much better than what we had. So then when Poet left and I had all these other guys who were working on their characters, I was like, well, I don't want to derail them on their characters because we approved all these characters. We liked the idea of these characters. So I didn't want to pull any of those guys off of there. So I was like, all right, well, let's give this guy a shot. Like worst case scenario, we put out another call. Because at this point, I felt invincible with getting help. Like now, oh man, oh you young, foolish, naive Kinggath who thought you could get help forever. That is not the case anymore. But back then, like the first 2 years working on the mod, like if I put out a call for help on a video, we would get like dozens of applicants for any position. It was awesome. Now I'll put out a post and I might get one.
You get someone like me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think you were the last person that we brought on board because it's so rare that. Well, and I think I don't know what. I think it's a combination of like Fallout 4 is an old game now, so there's less people who are hyped about it. Hyped enough to be like, oh, yeah, I want to create for that, right?
Right.
And then less people watching videos about it, so less people to even hear my call for help. A whole bunch of reasons, and of course, some settlements is past its prime too. It's not as exciting anymore. So at the time, I gave Sir a chance. And he started working with Soul Reaver, and they were going along great. And then Soul Reaver he didn't just leave, but he kind of told us like, "Hey, I got to start backing away. Like I have a lot of stuff going on. I'm not going to have as much time for this." But at that point, by the time he did that, Sir Rick had kind of taken over. I think Soul Reaver he always pitched himself as a world builder. He's like, I'm really good at creating like these broad ideas, and he had these like a lot of outlines and like general ideas, but didn't really put a lot of dialogue to paper. And Sir Rick was really good at the dialogue. And so almost every line of dialogue you hear now in the main quest line, like in the Jake storyline, came from Sir Rick. And then over time, he started working with Cynical Bounce, who was originally came on as a concept artist and settlement designer. Also showed that she is a very, very good writer. And so she's kind of become his writing partner. And yeah, they've been just writing away. We've got other writers involved as well. Andy Cowdy does a lot of writing for us, and he was solely responsible for the CPD quest line.
It's a good quest.
And let's see, Cynical's her babies are the Nightingales and the NLTC. Both of those quest lines were all hers. And then yeah, a lot of like we have all those characters, that character project that we started this with. I think we got through half of them. I think about 50 characters made it in. Some of them are diminished from what we originally envisioned. So we had this idea of everyone would have a pretty extensive dialogue pool and quest line. And some of them, they walk up to you and be like, hey, I heard about your settlement. You got a place for me? And then you just get a prompt that says yes or no. Like it's that simple. So some of them, aren't as fleshed out as we like. But still, I think between all three chapters, between the characters off the main quest and those characters from that project, I think you can recruit probably 70 or so people. You can maybe more. I'd have to do. I should be interesting to do a count, but we ended up with a lot, which is pretty awesome because that was really the goal of like one of the things that ended up in the story. There are lines like Jake will start to kind of voice this is that it's not about settlements, it's about a community, it's about people. And so like taking the focus off of the plots and more on the people, we built that into our mechanics too. When you build a plot, the resources are not just about the plot, it's about the number of people assigned to them.
And I think it's kind of good that you have some of those people that just come up and be like, hey, can I join? Because I don't want to quest for everyone who comes up there to be like, hey, can you go get me a battery so I can build this and then I'll join you.
Right.
So it's kind of nice just having someone come up and be like, hey, I have some better stats. I'm going to come join you. I'm like, great.
Yeah, I think it worked out well that we have like a variety pack. Some are pretty lengthy quests and some are no quests at all.
So is chapter 3 the end of it, or is there any more things coming out for it?
So chapter 3 is the last like monster piece of content we put out. We ended up having to cut a lot of stuff to get here. So what our cycle tends to be is we'll set out with a goal of X things. It'd be like, this is what we hope to achieve with this chapter. And then we basically go for as hard as we can. Well, I wouldn't say that. Some of us go as hard as we can, others less so, until we get to about 8 months. Then we all go hardcore. At about the 8-month mark, that's when I start getting antsy because I like to release something at least once a year. Keeps everybody motivated because it's exciting to get to those releases. It's fun to see the trailers. I mean, like when we start setting up trailers, I always feel like the trailers are almost as much for team morale as they are for player hype.
Yeah, I got to experience one of those, and I have to agree.
It's really cool to see everybody's work come together, right? You're all working in vacuums. or silos, whatever you want to call it, for months. And it's hard to see the vision because it's hard to get it all together until it's all working, you know? So I like to have those catalyst points. It's almost like we kind of treat it like, for anybody who works in the software, you're used to agile with sprints and stuff. And that's kind of how we've treated SS2 development, is every year we have a sprint to get to a chapter point. And that's over now. So now, but we do have a lot of cut content that we still want to do. Some of it was close to finished. We probably have like 6 or 7 side quests that were just about there. Like, you know, they had, you know, they're at 60-70% done. Like, we just have to finish rigging up the actual quest logic, but we've got like all the writing done. We've got the dialogue rigged up in the CK, and now it's just like make the objectives do their things and get the voice actors to record the lines. So close enough where it's like, well, we can't leave that there. Or some of them we have like whole new giant cells designed. Like, we have at least 3 huge buildings that we designed, dungeons that, you know, I'm not going to just pitch those just because we happen to hit the end of chapter 3.
Right.
So we're planning on doing like big patches. So I used to do this when I was mostly solo, would put out like exciting. I shouldn't say I was mostly solo. There were a lot of other people on the team there. It's just during SS1, things played out a lot differently than they do now. So back in SS1, it was mostly like I was just doing all the things, and I would periodically like grab a couple people and ask for help. And now it's kind of become, with SS2, it's more, you've been to some of the meetings where it's just kind of like we're all pushing in the same direction on one big thing. Whereas back when it was SS1 dev, I was just kind of doing stuff and being like, hey, you're an artist, can you make this for me so I can make this thing work? And like a lot like that.
More of a pool of resources that you got opposed to pitching ideas between team.
Right. And then it was just kind of like whatever I dreamt up, that was what would happen. Now it's more like the writers are doing the dreaming, I'm building out the systems, our artists are trying to make stuff work, animators taking a look at quests and seeing where they can punch them up. You know, it's like everybody kind of, we're starting more with a story vision rather than just me arbitrarily picking system ideas. It's more of a collaborative effort now. But during the time when I was doing that, I would periodically like get enough stuff that was kind of related that I'd be like, oh, this will make a cool patch. Like, let's make a little trailer for this. I am like a novice wannabe trailer maker. Like, that's what that would be. Like, in an alternate universe, that would have been my career. Now, I'm not good at it. No, I'm not saying I'm good at it. I just love it so much. I think trailers are amazing because you basically like you take this big idea, if it's a movie or a game, and you distill it down to its elements in like 2 or 3 minutes and try and get everybody hyped. And that's so fun. And really, like, it's a little magic. It's a little bit magic.
Yeah, the last one was fire, watching everybody blow up and so excited for it to come out and just drop it like that.
Oh, that trailer was it came out so good. Those guys crushed the trailer. So, and that's where it makes me feel like, oh, I was terrible at trailer making. Like, if you go watch some of the trailers I used to do for SS1, I used to think, oh, that was really good. I'm getting good at this. And then I watch something that a pro does, like Pontus, who does our trailers now. And they're like, that's his job. And it's like, oh my God, like this is night and day. And yeah, but building toward those little things, I think, will be our future for SS2 of let's take all the content that we have partially finished. We'll take all the systems that I had to cut for time, and we'll group those things up into interesting patches. And then like every 2 or 3 months, we'll put out a little trailer and be like, hey, here's patch 2. Or what are we on? 3? Well, we're on 3.00. So it'll be like, here's 3.1. And it's going to add, you know, maybe some new factions you can recruit, or here's patch 3.2. And it's going to add the HQ overhaul and maybe some little side quests with it, stuff like that, where it'll be like themed patches. I mean, a lot of live service games do this, right? Where they've got like the seasons and stuff. It'll be kind of like that. It'll be the SS2 equivalent of seasons, I guess, for until we get all this stuff done.
Awesome. So there's going to be a break as soon as Starfield drops for everybody. But after that, there's going to be some content working towards.
Yeah. After the hotfixing, which hopefully will be done the next couple of days. But yeah, the lot of content left. I looked at like, so I have a list of features that I want to finish. The story team has a list of story stuff they would like to do. And I basically like pared down those 2 lists into a bunch of content that I think will take us about 2 years to produce. But that was like, I chopped off half the list. So there's still another like giant chunk of stuff that we could be working on for years yet. But it's just going to be a matter of, you know, like what we started with, what our target goal is for the next 2 years is to make it so that SS2 feels complete, so that there's not money left on the table, as it were. Like that there's not things that you see like low hanging fruit where you're like, oh, they should have done this or they should have done that. We want it to feel like all the features that are in there are fleshed out, the quality of life stuff's all there, polish is there, the bugs are worked out. And for characters that you don't feel like, I want to know what happened to this character, or, oh, it's a bummer we didn't get to learn more about so and so. So we want to kind of fill in all those gaps for what we have, and then we'll see where we're at. Like maybe everybody's just absolutely in love with Starfield, or maybe Starfield doesn't have good modding tools. Maybe they lock us out and we don't get to mod it as much as we want, or maybe I decide that I want to become a Unity developer instead. I don't know. So like the who knows what the future holds in that regard.
Right.
But we're all still having fun with us too. So like disbanding the team right now doesn't sound fun at all.
Well,
So
there's the Fallout show, it'll be coming next year. So I think there's going to be a second win. Plus, there's no Fallout in sight for years.
well, that's another. I mean, that's the thing with Bethesda games. That's crazy. Is how long they take, right? So you're talking about franchise is going to be forever before we see another one. But also the way people play these games is crazy. Like I don't know any other game that has a player base that does what we do with Bethesda games. And tell me if this is your experience. It seems to be what most is that you play a Bethesda game and then you're hungry for more, and so you roll up another one. You load up one of the old ones that you love. Like, oh, I'm gonna go play Skyrim now, or man, I haven't played Fallout 3 in ages. And then you kind of find yourself on a loop playing through these old games every few years, and then once in a while you get really hyped and you go download a bunch of mods, and now your game lasts hundreds of hours. And we're still doing that to these games that are now like 20 years old.
What's even more incredible about it is that you go back, hundreds of times playing these games and creating a new character, but you probably do the total mission story once.
Right. And then you just get lost in side content. And then what's really crazy about that is like the core mechanics of these games are nothing special, right? They're like mediocre shooters at best, right? But still, it's something about that unlimited freedom and like not knowing what you're going to find, or is there going to be some new quest I'm going to stumble on that I've never seen before? It's like it's super, super exciting.
Yeah, it really is that it just works magic. But somehow it looks like Starfield has like gotten above that from what I've seen.
Starfield looks too good to be true.
Everything I've seen.
That Starfield Direct looks like, how is this real? That's the same way I feel like when I see people talking about Baldur's Gate 3, which I haven't touched because I don't have time.
Me too.
But also Sarik is actually, he is the most diehard Baldur's Gate fan you will ever meet. And he's like very offended that they took Baldur's Gate license and called this like the third game because it's it's so far removed from the story of the other two games. So then it's like that's like rubbing off on me. Well, like, oh, I'm almost in solidarity. I got to stand with Sir Rick here because I also loved the original. Like if it weren't for the original two Baldur's Gate games, I would never have fallen in love with the Fallout franchise because that's how I got there. As I was playing all those medieval RPGs back then, or D&D RPGs, it was like Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, and Planescape.
Dark Alliance was my first console
Dark
RPG.
Alliance. Oh, that was a great game. And so like all of those then got me into that, liking those games. And then when Fallout came along and it was such a breath of fresh air for that same top-down isometric turn-based game to then all of a sudden be in this new genre I'd never experienced because I didn't know about post-apocalypse. I was too young to watch Mad Max then. Ironically, too young probably to play Fallout as well.
I mean, what was your porn name in Fallout 2? I mean.
Right. So, but I didn't. But yeah, but nobody was like monitoring computer games then. Like parents weren't in the know then. This was pre.
Postal.
What was it? Was it like the was it early 90s when like Congress got all involved in video game violence and there was like all this uproar and there was like a big moral panic over video games?
Yeah, it was about the same time Eminem, they went after him too.
Right. So like then like nobody was really paying attention to video games. It was just like, oh, it's kids stuff, whatever. So I could just play whatever I wanted. My parents didn't have any clue. But movies, like every movie got vetted by mom and dad. So it was but video games were where I could go explore stuff I shouldn't have seen elsewhere.
Was it Duke Nukem? That was the first introduction. It had like 2D strippers. I'm like, whoa, this is the coolest game ever. Like paper mache dolls dancing up and down. Like, oh,
yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, so I haven't explored Baldur's Gate 3 because I also am worried about it now tainting my vision. Although I doubt that's gonna be the case. It's like between Baldur's Gate 3 and Starfield, it seems like people are going to be sated for RPGs for the next X amount of years.
Yeah, same with me. I couldn't touch Baldur's Gate right now because I am such a huge fan. I love those in-depth RPG story, like in the story of like Mass Effect, we get attached to the NPCs. So I'm like, I just can't play it right now. I'm gonna have to wait like months after Starfield before I download it. Maybe when the next DLC for it comes or something.
Yeah, for me, the Baldur's Gate 3 will probably be like after I'm bored of Starfield and I'm ready again for another like clean slate RPG, which could be a while, because I only need, like, now at this point, because I find I get more enjoyment out of making the games than actually playing them, is I need to play a new game, like a big game, like once a year. So the last big game I played was probably, I think last year I played Elden Ring. The year before that was Cyberpunk. So I like basically play like one big RPG every year. And so this year it's got to be Starfield. It's got to be Starfield.
Yeah, and speaking of that, Cyberpunk, that DLC looks great. Armored Core looks great. I mean,
how are people supposed to have enough time to play all this?
Oh, seriously.
these like 200-300 hour games, and like there's no way you can boot up Phantom Liberty and not start a new character, right? Like they redid the whole perk system, and it's gonna be like, oh, I don't remember what my character did. I gotta start over.
And the DLC is in the middle of it, so it's like there's no way you can take a finished character and go for it.
Right. So it's like, so now that's another couple hundred hours I got to find. Is, man, what a time to be alive as a teenager right now.
Oh
right?
My God, yeah, I would kill for those days again, where I can just sit with like Diet Coke and some pizza and play EverQuest. The days definitely before women.
Yeah, but pre-women, pre-work, could do that and grind it out. Now, like I said, one a year, and I'm pretty happy. So I'm excited to play some Starfield. Well, I guess I don't, and it's not. Well, the nice thing is between kids, I get to play a lot of random games. So like all the little non-bury yourself in RPG games, I get to play now. Like I've been taking my kids through the Mario catalog, which has been fun, and I play a lot of Sim Settlements now, because that's now my Wednesdays is stream playing Sim Settlements. Which, thank God, the Fallout 4 combat is so solid. You know, I was riffing on Bethesda games for being like mediocre in their mechanics and stuff, but Fallout 4 has actually got a really good gunplay.
They definitely had to upgrade from where they were at before for combat between, Skyrim and then Fallout 4.
Yeah.
They still lacked in close combat, but I think Starfield looked pretty good with those punches.
Yeah, their melee leaves a lot to be desired. But I always felt like the actual shooting mechanics in Fallout 4 were totally solid. I mean, and I was like a diehard Destiny player in there, so like I know what it feels to play a really great shooter. Like the Bungie is some of the best at that, and Bethesda's not up there. They're no Call of Duty with their shooting mechanics or anything. Totally serviceable. Like it feels good to handle guns in Fallout 4. So thank God for that, because I play so much of it, and it would get pretty tiring if not that.
I agree. I think that's one of the things that people do go back to, actually, and probably would never admit it. Going back to playing the VATS and seeing things explode and stuff. I don't know.
You have the full weapon customization system is really nice. It's actually one of the things that makes it hardest to go play New Vegas and Fallout 3 for me now. Is like I remember the gunplay being way better in those games, and it was like, oh no, I just lived in VATS. Is how I played those games.
I'm waiting for the whole mod systems to come out for me to relive those, like Oblivion and then New Vegas. Like I can't go backwards. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if there's like a leak out that Oblivion's going to get a remake, which would be pretty cool.
It would also be really weird, because there's a team that's been working on it for God knows how long.
I know that I would feel so bad for them, for Rebel Z's and all those guys. Like there's the amount of work and years of labor they put into that to get the rug pulled out from under them. And what would be really heartbreaking is if like there was a remake coming out and they got a cease and desist. That would be brutal.
Oh, but I mean, Bethesda, it's cheaper to buy this team off if you really to make a whole new game and just be like, hey guys, we love what you're doing. Let's support the modding community and pay for your mod.
Yeah. Well, now Big Papa Microsoft's involved, so who knows what's going on behind the scenes. I'm sure they don't have full control anymore. But yeah, it would be some serious bad will to your modding community to do something like that. Which I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday about this. Is one of the things that's going to be interesting with the Bethesda mod scene is how many people are getting into that. Like how many game studios are going in the direction of user created content? Like even like Fortnite just added the ability for Unreal Engine to work in it. Like Minecraft has had a thriving modding scene for a long time. And now one of the things that Unreal brought on, what do you call it? We were just talking about Cyberpunk people. What is the studio name? Why can't I think of it?
Red. No,
CD Projekt Red. Yeah, thank you. So got them off of Red Engine because they want them to help develop like their open world and RPG suite, and Unreal has been adding in a lot of like modding features into the engine. I think they realize that the world is the gaming industry is coalescing around user created content for generating like really high value microtransactions effectively. And so like Bethesda's going to have to keep up in the quality of their tools and support, which is really exciting. Like the idea, because right now they kind of give us our tools, and like with Fallout 4, after they put out the mod tools, they had some pretty good support early on. Like if you trolled around the Bethesda forums, like the some of the guys from their team were there listening to feedback and stuff, and they were actually making patches and improvements to like Papyrus and stuff, which was pretty awesome. But like I think they might take it to the next level going forward, because they're going to start to get competition on that front. And now that, you know, they're doing things like Starfield going to the Game Pass means, you know, they're not really banking long-term on unit sales. So they've got to have some other plan. And I'm hoping to see them pushing the user-created content as the way to keep people in that environment, right? Like get more tools in mod authors' hands. Let's get a better polished version of the creation kit. Let's get official tutorials. Let's get, you know, updates to fix things modders need. Man, that would be awesome. I have really high hopes for Starfield modding that I think it's going to be like next level.
Yeah, I think every mod author I've talked to, they've basically requested the same key thing, that's like tutorials and hotkeys.
Yes, give us a hotkey guide. There's so many I've figured out either by accident or because like I heard it from a person who heard it from a person who knows a developer at Bethesda, right? So there's some that just like are massive time savers, like on the. And now I have to tell some for anybody who's listening.
Yeah, please.
Like, wait, what's he talking about? On the alias screen, you can do like Control-Shift-O to switch things to optional. Like that is such a huge time saver, because going to that alias screen is the worst. And sometimes when you're building a big quest, the quest won't fire, and it's usually because one of the aliases won't fill. So figuring out which one is a pain, but switching them all to optional, you can load it in game and see once the quest starts, then you can check which ones aren't filled. And stuff like that. Like that's not documented anywhere. Like just happened to hear that from somebody. And it's like, oh my God, you just changed my life with how many hours I spent.
It took me forever to realize that I could make another object window, you know, like these are just things that I have no idea.
Right. It's not intuitive to do that. Yeah. Or to find that out. Yeah. A lot of that is we stumble on by accident. Yeah. Having like proper documentation would be fantastic. They actually did a really good job with Skyrim creation kit documentation, which is weird because they had such a small team compared to what they've got now. It's bizarre to me that they would have been able to put that much more effort into it back then than they could for Fallout 4. Like it was a weird thing. And maybe it was growing pains, you know, maybe it was like, because their studio has like blown up since Fallout 4 came out. You know, they went from single studio with like just over 100 people to now, how many does Bethesda have? Like 3 or 4, and probably thousands of people now across them. So I'm sure that kind of messes things up a bit, right? Like where you're just trying to figure out who the guy who's in charge of tutorials maybe now is too much on his plate. I don't know how they're all laid out there, but I'm just hopeful that we'll get like better support now that there's a big move toward user created content across the industry, that we'll see just better modding tools, more feedback from the thing. Because man, some of these bugs that we've like discovered in Fallout 4, and we know exactly what their cause is. Like we have reproduction steps in vanilla. We've got script extender authors who can dig into the code and see exactly what the problem is. And you know, if they were on a game with a long-term support plan, then they would hear us out and get those fixed. And we haven't had that in Fallout 4, unfortunately. So I'm hopeful that Starfield will be a turning point.
Well, I know it's far in the future, but we were just talking about modding for Starfield. If the game goes well and as well as it's been looking, and I don't know if you've caught any of the leaks, but would you intend on modding Starfield? And if you do you have any ideas that you think would fit it?
I don't know yet. Like
colonies, you know.
The game looks really good, and I love some sci-fi stuff. Like some of my other favorite franchises are Star Wars, Mass Effect. I love games in those. I love some of the Star Wars television movie stuff, but the games are usually fantastic. And so like getting to go immerse in that kind of environment looks awesome. Especially, you know, I think one of the most polarizing things I think that came out of the Starfield stuff was the space magic that they like stealth dropped at the end of that one trailer, or the ending of the Starfield Direct, where all of a sudden he lifts his hand up and all that stuff. And I was like, yes, we get to be Jedi. Like to me, that was like a heck yes moment, because it looked like everything was going to be so grounded. But it's like, no, now we can do all of our space fantasies in this franchise, right? We can do everything from the Star Trek to Star Wars and anything in between. That's exciting to me, and means that this can be kind of that everything game. And I think those of us who build and play a lot of mods, that's kind of what we are trying to do, right? We're trying to like build these crazy load orders or fill in the gaps so that these Bethesda games can be our everything game in that genre. So we've got Fallout for post-apocalypse, which feels kind of niche as a genre. We've got the high fantasy with I guess it's kind of low fantasy, or is it? I don't know the difference. What's the difference between high fantasy and low fantasy? I should just stop using terms that I don't know.
For me, it's always just been sci-fi and high fantasy. Low fantasy, this is kind of a new one for me because I think of elves and dwarves as the high fantasy.
Right. Well, I think I guess it's high fantasy. It's a lot of. I think low fantasy is like Conan. It's like considered low fantasy. I think I could be totally wrong. Anybody listening who knows we're just talking out our asses, like call us out.
Yeah, don't light us on fire though. It's just
don't light us on fire too hard. We're Fallout people. But anyway, so we got Elder Scrolls for fantasy, and now we've got sci-fi covered with the space with Starfield. So it's pretty cool to see there's a Bethesda game that covers the biggest genres. And they really, like you said, it's fantasy and sci-fi are the two big ones. Post-apocalypse is like a niche little corner of sci-fi, but it definitely feels distinct enough from space sci-fi that I feel like it's kind of become its own little niche genre.
Yeah, it's like sci-fi with no hope.
It's sci-fi with no hope. That's funny. It's it's like if sci-fi went wrong, but like at least with Fallout, this is one of the things I loved about Fallout 4, and I think sucked me in, and with the settlement stuff even more so is it's, you start at that dark, hopeless scene, but you're actually rebuilding from there. In fact, all the Fallout games are kind of like that, right? You're in you see the world is over and things are really grim, but then here you come like the savior out of the waste to kind of make things better again.
Right, fix the water system.
Right. There's always an element of hope to them. To the Fallout games, you're trying to stop some villain, trying to make things better for people in some way. It's a good fertile ground it's like a power fantasy, right? Like you're building yourself up to like you're the greatest human there ever was.
Okay, like a little bit of a space opera type fantasy type of you're the good and the coming in the way, and you're gonna make everything better.
Exactly. Yeah, you're the one, all right? And you end up solving everybody's problems, and you become more powerful than every enemy in the game. It's kind of what these end up playing out like, and it's addictive. It's fun.
So that's a yes, just no ideas yet of
back to the question. It's I'll probably mod it. I don't know if I'll get into some settlements level. Like,
right,
I didn't intend on getting some settlements level with Fallout 4, right? I didn't sit down and start modding Fallout 4 and be like, I can't wait to make the biggest, craziest mod I've ever played. It was more like, here are my list of like flaws in the game. So like while I'm playing it, I'll do the same for Starfield. It'll be like, this kind of irritates me, or I wish system was deeper, or that payoff sucked for the gameplay systems. And I used to use that when I'd play so that I could find mods. It wasn't about making mods.
Mm-hmm.
And then for Fallout 4, I had a few problems that nobody was making mods for. Or their solution I didn't like. So like the first problem I had with Fallout 4 was I hate the inventory system in Fallout, in all the Fallouts.
Very common Bethesda problem.
I guess in Elder Scrolls is the same thing. These big giant lists of items. It's so boring. It takes forever to find stuff. And you kind of make it a little better with mods when you can add in more filter categories and stuff, but still it's just like I got so much. I'm spending all my time dicking around on my inventory screen, and it's just a big list of text things. And so that part always bothered me. But at the same time, I also don't want to leave any loot. So it's like my this instinct to collect all the loot plus inventory were conflicting with each other. And with Fallout 4, it was like, well, most of the loot I just want to scrap. So I really just want to like grab all this stuff for that sake. And so like the solution the community came up with was like backpacks, right? You just can create crazy backpacks where you just use a cheat and give yourself unlimited carry rate. And I was like, well, then I'm still dicking around my inventory. I still got all this stuff to haul around. So I had the idea of what came salvage beacons, which was like, well, what if I just let the settlers come grab it all? It still doesn't fully solve the problem because of limitations of the game. Like I'm still looting things. And so that's kind of a bummer that I'm still playing around with my inventory. But at the end of the day, it's just like, you ship it back to my settlement and I'll deal with it when I'm ready for it. Right. So at least it was like concentrated inventory management sessions. Because that tends to be how I get around it in Bethesda games is I do some dungeons and loot like crazy. And then when I'm getting a little tired for the night or getting ready to stop, then I want to go back to wherever my home base is, whether it be a town or a player home or a settlement in Fallout 4, unload my inventory, organize all the stuff, take what I'm going to sell back to a shopkeeper and like get myself ready for the next session. Like in the next session, I want it to start off with running off to do quests. I don't want to start off each session with micromanaging my inventory. So I find if I do it in chunks, it's less painful. And then so that's where salvage beacons came in. It was just like a solution to a problem I had that made the gameplay feel more natural for how I liked it.
I agree. 76, that was the biggest highlight and problem of it is you have a limited space. And so now you have to sit there and delegate what junk you're going to keep and what are you going to hold on to wood now? Or are you going to, God forbid you need concrete.
Yeah. So then the end of every Fallout 76 session was 20 minutes of filtering through your inventory and your stashes, right? Trying to figure out what can stay, what can go. But at least again, that's as long as it's always in those concentrated chunks, it was more palatable. I don't want to have to be doing it while I'm running around. And so any of those games, I end up with like a list of here are the issues I have. Let's go find a solution to them on Nexus. And then the second one that I wasn't finding was I like building settlements, but I don't want to do this meticulous detail every time I do a new playthrough. I think about, especially because like when mods start coming out, inevitably with Bethesda games, you have to restart a lot, right? Because you're trying to find a load order, and then you're like, oh, I hate what this mod did, or oh, this mod crashes me, or these two don't work together. And it takes quite a few playthroughs before you figure out like a good load order. So I knew that I was going to be restarting a lot. So then I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have to. So I put all this work in decorating the settlement and then find out my load order is garbage. And I got to start again, and I'm going to have to build these settlements again. I'm like, that's going to be awful. I got to find a way to make this better. So I had the idea of like, well, what if I just like built a house and it decorated itself? And then from there kind of got into I always liked city builders. Could I do something like SimCity? And like the plot thing was born.
And then bang, 7 years.
7 years later. And then it was like, oh, people really like this. How else could we expand it? And, a lot of people were like pitching me ideas for stuff like, oh yeah, that could be cool. That could be cool. And then I was like, oh, I bet I could incorporate this with salvage beacons eventually. So then like all these ideas I had, and the fact that like all of a sudden there were all these people who wanted to help, like then the goalposts kept growing. This is the first time throughout Sim Settlements that like now that we've got chapter 3 out where I feel myself reining in instead of stretching out. Like usually I'm very pro feature creep. But now I've gotten to the point where it's like this is feeling like a complete system now. And like we've got the story arc to drive us, and feels like we're getting to a point close where I can like close the book. But because I know stuff takes so long, and without those big chapters to push toward, we end up having to aim our sights a little smaller, because those big giant sprints actually let us hit bigger goals in a shorter amount of time, but they also like threaten to burn us out. So without that, like I've got to keep my sight set lower, because getting everybody rallied together to do something cool over 2 months, it's not going to be nearly as cool as what we could do in a year. So it's going to be less inspiring for people to like put in, like a month of 15-hour days, right? Like it's a little harder. It's a little harder sell to do.
Is that how the chapters kind of?
That's how the chapters end up going. Yeah, they naturally end up in that state of like we all are crunching, and it's not like it's one of those things. Whenever I hear like, there's always the complaints about crunch in the video game industry. Like obviously, I'm not forcing anybody to even be here, much less crunch. Right. Everyone just kind of like we just kind of do it. And I think that's part of the thing. Like when I hear the conversation in the video game industry about like they're making wage slaves and forcing them to crunch, and I'm sure that's the case in some of these giant studios, but I've had like all the small studios end up doing it. It's just like there's just when you have so much passion, you just kind of do it. It's not because anyone's telling you to. You're just like, man, I want to get this done. I want to get this feature in. Like we're going to launch at this date. Like I really want to get this in, and I want this to be great. So I'm going to put in the extra hours to make it work.
Yeah, and as long as you're getting compensated for this thing and you're doing what you love, I don't see any problem with being there longer. I mean, how many people sit at their hobby and they would be there all week if they could? Right.
That's I would, if I didn't have to pay any bills, like I would be doing this over almost anything else. Yeah. So then you're talking about at the game dev level, like, and they're getting paid for it. Like that sounds like heaven to me. Yeah, but I guess it depends on the crunch, right? If it's like mandated crunch on a soulless grind, like that's different than little micro teams who are just like trying to go toe to toe with the big guys, so they're gonna put in extra effort.
Right. If you have to make the game golem, maybe that's a slave labor.
It's a little tougher to put in those hours. Although I don't think that was a huge team though. I bet there were a handful of guys on that team who were like putting in the crazy hours, being like, oh, we got it. We can do better. Like they shipped to that game. It wasn't going to go well, but
yeah, they probably all had like, fake names on their list.
Oh, those poor guys. I always feel bad when a game comes out and it's just utter humiliation out there. Like, when Frontier got ripped apart, I felt so bad for those guys. Like, oh my God, just years and years of work, and then a few cringy meme moments in it just get plucked apart, and like everybody reams them for it. And it's like, oh man, those guys poured their souls into that. People often ask when I'm doing live streams and stuff, like, hey, you're going to make your own game. It's like, I don't know. I don't know if I want that. I hear enough horror stories from people in the industry of like the added pressure of that seems kind of rough. So yeah, I don't know where my future lies in that. This is why I'm, right now I'm just focused on, and why I can't answer your Starfield question clearly is because like right now I just one foot in front of the other. Like,
right, and you're still in Fallout.
I'm still in Fallout, still in the headspace, still have a lot of stuff I want to wrap up. Like there's a lot of, like with chapter 3, we shipped a bunch of new mechanics, and a lot of them are just not fleshed out enough to leave them like that. Going back to earlier in our conversation of talking about how people play these games for years, is like I want it to be that every time somebody comes back to Fallout 4 and they install SS2, that they're very happy with it, and each time they do, it feel like it's better than the last time they did. So, and by the end, like by the time I'm ready to walk away, I'd hope to be that most of the major issues are worked out, most of the compatibility issues with other big mods are worked out, and that people can just go in and have a great experience and go back to their gaming. Because that's the other thing with this, in this world we live in where there's dozens of free to play games vying for your attention, and they're all hyper polished by these like super pro teams. It's hard to convince people to play mods anymore. Like it's, when I started playing with mods, like it was because we ran out of games to play. Like when I was a teenager, you could play every game that was worth playing. There'd be some number of bad ones out there. There's always the ETs of Nintendo days out there that you just avoid like the plague. But you could play through every game that was, worth a write-up in a magazine and still have time left to play more games. So like then mods kind of filled that gap of like, man, there's not enough games to play, or there was a financial reason of like, I can't afford to buy any more games, so I'll go get some mods. Neither of those is a barrier anymore. Now there's too much stuff to play, and there are amazing games that are free. So, we're competing for attention with really big budgets. I feel like it's kind of, we owe it to players to get this thing to a state where anybody who stumbles upon it years later is rewarded for putting in the time.
Modders, I think these days you have to pick kind of longevity games. You don't really want to risk jumping on something like that and do something, put a lot of work into, and no one's playing the game.
Well, and that could happen to Fallout 4.
It could. It's a Bethesda game. I think people are still hardcore on it.
Yeah, they will be for a while, but maybe Fallout 5 will usurp it. So that's
true.
Eventually. So, but like you said, I don't know when we're going to get that. It doesn't look like it's anytime soon. Looks very much like Fallout 4 is going to be the Fallout for the 2020s. Maybe we get Fallout 5 in 2030. So
it's so weird to think about how old I'll be by then.
Don't think about that too much. So that's a lot of life left for some settlements. If I would like it to continue to live on it and to be something that people want to keep playing and whatnot, there's a lot of years left where people want a Fallout experience like that. Fallout 4 is going to be their main jam. My biggest problem with and why I even want to wind down at all. So like I've always loved the idea of having like a lifelong project, like something that you're just building on forever, because it's very, very work toward that magnum opus of like, and one of the cool things, and one of the things that I fell in love with software design is that because you can reuse your programming, you're reusing your scripts and everything, and you're always building up that knowledge, is that you're like, it was the first thing I found in my life where I felt like you were perpetually building toward a magnum opus. Like everything I learn every day in programming is useful the next day, and I can take work I did from 10 years ago and use it again to build on. Like it's such a cool thing. It's something kind of unique to software, because things you do in real world crafts, like you literally are destroying things to create things, right? You can't just like, you make a chair, you can't go reuse the wood from that chair to make a new better chair. Whereas in software, you can do that. You can just keep recreating it. It's free to reproduce the thing you created. And so like, taking that idea of what made me fell in love with software design into games is like, okay, well, now that same concept applies of like, when you come up with cool mechanics, like you can just keep working on, you can use that core and just upgrade it and add things onto it. And periodically you got to go back and kind of smooth things out. But overall, you can, like, for example, with SS1 to SS2, the plot concept is rock solid. It feels really good. It's fun to play. It's like a good core. And then, we took that idea with S2, evolved it a little bit, but we were able to keep, the bits that worked really well. Like, okay, well, we already solved what feels good for upgrade times and upgrade requirements. Let's not mess with that. Like, why do we need to change the happiness requirements or anything like those? That's a solved problem. So we got to just build upward on it. Standing on the shoulders of giants. In this case, the giant was our own creation. You can kind of building up towards something, and I like that feeling. So I like the idea of this, like building up towards some ultimate game that took a lifetime to create. Like that's very, very exciting to me. My concern right now is that Fallout 4 is not a good foundation to do that on. There are too many engine limitations. We're running into too many bugs that are just fundamental problems. So while I would love the idea, like I have enough ideas and the team has enough ideas to take something like Sim Settlements and like we could just literally work on it for 20 years and like keep making the story like more grand and adding more content. I feel like we have pushed this engine to its absolute limit. And to some people, we pushed it too far where they're like, some people are turned off from it and being like, that game's too, that mod's too script heavy or that mod crashes my game too much. And so it's not a platform that I think I want to build on long term. And that's another reason why I'm winding down. And I have high hopes for Starfield right now.
Right, because you can carry on that papyrus skill you got.
Yeah, I have that. It would be very nice to be able to continue this. I think I'm better with Papyrus now than I am with all of the programming languages I use for my work because there's so much more passion into learning it, right? Like, I know enough to do my job but I rarely find any reason to go learn new stuff. Like, things that make me faster, sure, but learning new, tricks in it is less exciting than it is in a game where I'm like, maybe I could make the game do this if I figure that, you know what I mean? Right. Like most like programming is a little enough thing now that there's not really a lot of new things you're learning to program. It's more like, that's why there's a joke in computer software that half of your job is going to Stack Overflow and asking questions and looking up and copy pasting code or now ChatGPT, same thing. You go in and copy paste a bunch of code because most of the problems you can imagine have already been solved. So then it's just kind of cobbling them together. Whereas like modding a game, or even making a game, there's some of that, but it's at least really, really fun and exciting to do because when you build a really cool game experience, other people get excited to play it. When you build a really complex inventory system for corporate employees, really thrilled to get that. Oh, thanks. I get to do my job. So there's a lot more reward on the other side of it too. Of like once you show people what you did, there's a lot more excitement in game dev.
Right. I'm pretty sure your boss isn't going like, "Oh man, that's some really sick code you did." Awesome.
Right. No, it's more like, "Hey, this doesn't work. Fix it."
Well, you're talking about using AI. I can jump right into that question. Have you
Sure.
you've used AI a little bit? You said like ChatGPT for some modding. I saw you did some live streams with it. Have you used it in any other ways? And what tools would you want developed by AI?
So I use it a lot for programming. I think it's great for that. Again, it basically like skips that step of like, okay, let's go search documentation and that's really where I think it shines. It's documentation you can have a conversation with. So you can ask. So a lot of times, and like we can use you for an example. When you first messaged me about working on some settlements, you were just trying to learn more stuff about modding, right? You want to learn how to create this stuff. And sometimes like just having somebody you can ask questions to is the difference between success and failure. Yeah. Because it's really hard to like go through documentation and answer a question because your question, you don't have enough foundational knowledge of the subject to ask good questions to a search engine. Whereas something like the AI, you can ask questions very colloquially, like something you would ask another human, and it will figure out roughly what you mean and get you the appropriate documentation and repackage it in step-by-step form that you need. So especially for coding languages, and there's some other things they can do, but coding is specific, it's very, very good at. You pitch it like, I'm trying to make a program that does this. I'd like to use this language. I need it to be on the web, or I need it to work with Excel files or something. And it will give you a very like good path. And even if it doesn't give you usable code, it will give you the steps so that then you have the right terminology to either ask other people or go to the Stack Overflows and ask. So it's a really good like mediator between languages, like between the, average person just speaking in a conversation, getting you from that point to being able to have a conversation with an expert. Like that to me is where it's wonderful at. I also think it's I haven't messed with it much with translation because I should try it sometime because we have quite a few people on our team who don't speak English as their first language, but we speak, they're just used to speaking English. But it would be very interesting to have a conversation with somebody with ChatGPT or something similar as a mediator, as the translator. Because if they're so good at translating like technical documentation, I got to imagine they should be really, really good at translating between foreign languages.
Yeah, I haven't been able to test that, even though my wife's Japanese.
You should give it a go. Give it a go. Send her some emails and run them through ChatGPT and see what she says about them.
Oh, that does remind me of my wife. We were just joking around because I was trying to show her ChatGPT because, it's really fun to play with.
Yeah.
And I said, well, you're a massage therapist. Why don't you like help it write your bio? And it did beautifully, but there was one part in it where it said, Suzu wanted to get into massage therapy because her mom was a healer in a small village. I was like, where the hell is that pulling that box?
Yeah, you definitely, that's the thing. You can't really use anything it produces verbatim, but it's a good stepping stone. So I really like it for teaching, for translation between, I'm using the term language, but what I really mean is like disciplines, I guess. It's a really good translator. Like I think I've been, one of the things that's on my to-do list that I haven't had time for because I've been like hyper focused on SS2 for the last 8 months trying to get chapter 3 done, is for modding, for specifically for Fallout 4 modding, is I really want to create, because there's a lot of tutorials for this now, of taking like a ChatGPT or a chat or equivalent, like one of the large language models, and training it on specific data so that you can ask it questions. And I was like, man, I want to do that with all of the tutorials that I've written and all of the creationkit.com and like the Nexus forums, feed it all that knowledge. So that way we could have like a Fallout 4 modding bot where you just ask it questions and it would get you in generally, it's not going to give you any like usable papyrus necessarily, but it could at least point you in the right direction. So that, because so often people will message me, hey, I got this idea for a mod. I've been watching your tutorial series. Do you think this is possible? And do you know how I got to do it? And it's like, without them having somebody to riff off of and ask specific questions, which I can't be that person for all these people. I would never have time for anything else. It's going to take them, years to learn all that. But I think with some sort of bot helper, like you can get, like for somebody who wants to like, I want a weapon that shoots out water and makes plants grow. Like, yeah, that's doable, but it's hard to know what things do you need to learn to get there. Like how much scripting knowledge do you need to do that? How much knowledge do you need about making weapons? It's hard to figure that out. So you just kind of just have to learn everything. And that takes a long, long time to just try and learn all those disciplines.
And you can lab 11 your voice too. So you could be training all these people.
That stuff's scary. 11 Labs stuff is terrifying. I tricked my wife with 11 Labs, and that was kind of an eye-opening moment where I'm like, I don't know. There's a lot of, my voice is, there's so much of it out on the internet. Anybody could easily train and get a legit copy of it. And anybody who's got a lot of their voice out, which would be like video game actors and stuff, and anybody who does podcasts, like that's pretty creepy that people can just make them say whatever they want. Like I don't think it's going to be long before we have somebody getting canceled or some international incident being caused by somebody's voice being cloned. But even outside of that, it's just a little creepy, right? The idea that there could end up being a recording of you saying some really awful stuff.
Yeah, I could pop up on Lover's Lab and never know it.
Right. Which is why I like turn down people when they say like, oh, you should check out 11 Labs and try out, you can clone Nate and Nora's voice and make it sound really great. And it's like, well, Courtney Taylor has come out on Twitter multiple times and said, guys, please don't clone my voice. And if you find anyone who does, shut it down. And I get it. Like it feels creepy. It feels creepy. It's the same thing. Like it's the same thing with the image generators, like making naked pictures of celebrities. It's like, man, that's really personal. I'm all about AI taking away, making less work for us. Like I like it for coding and being like, okay, it can make our jobs faster. Like that seems like a great use of it, but making it to take humans and make those humans do things that they didn't
want to do or say.
Yeah, like they didn't. What's the word I'm looking for? They didn't subscribe to, that they didn't give permission for.
Consent.
Feels like it's consent. That's the word I'm looking for. They didn't consent to. It's getting into like really creepy territory. I think I was really hyped about the voice thing at first. In fact, when the AI stuff started to get on the scene, like a little bit before ChatGPT, but when we start, when I remember when it was when VA Synth came out. This was a tool that somebody put out in the mod community to help people make voices for Skyrim characters. And I actually talked with the creator of that for a long time. And I was trying to help him get what he needed to do the same thing for Fallout 4 of like, all right, let's do that for the player characters. And we could make them say whatever we want. But, during all that excitement, you forget that, wait, there's humans behind these. These aren't just characters. Like these are the real voices of a couple of human beings. And so like, that's the part of AI where I have a problem with, is like the creating content that represent real people. Like it's like, got to remember that these are actual humans that own their voices or own their likeness, that we can't forget about them. And it's not even monetary either. Like even people, like I don't want to see anybody cloning Jake's voice. Like, right. Even though there's no financial incentive for Tom to voice that character, we don't give him any money. We don't make any money on it. It's just a thing we give out for free, but still it's his voice. Like it's a very personal thing. And so I don't think we should be recreating content like that.
Yeah. And it's hard too, because once it's available and people have the ability to do it, someone's going to do it. And it's just like, where's the damage, and how are people going to rectify that damage is going to be interesting.
Well, and I think I'm against that from that perspective, but I think here's what I foresee is going to be the outcome of this is eventually some company is going to get the audio quality like indistinguishable, and it's pretty close already. And then either they're going to generate new voices from the ether so that nobody actually owns the voice, or they will pay people who aren't interested in being voice actors or actors who don't care about that, or maybe who are desperate for money. You know, like if when I was 20, I had have sold the rights to my voice. Yeah. Give me a couple $1,000. I'm like, sure, you can do whatever you want with it. And now my voice is owned by some corporation. That's what's going to happen. Yeah. So then you're going to end up with all these voices that are available that people either sold the rights to their voice or they were able to generate a new voice from nothing. And then that voice is going to get used by AI infinitely.
That has already been a problem before AI, is people not knowing the contract and selling their voice in perpetuity, like TikTok and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I think that's where it's gonna head. Is so like, yeah, we can protect all the current actors, but now that we've opened Pandora's box here, it's going to slowly shift the creative industry in that sense. Like I think, we'll always have some voice actors, but it's going to start getting even worse than it is in the hierarchy of like, there's going to be a handful of like really well paid voice actors. Yeah. And then there's going to be I guess the pyramid's going to narrow. There's going to be just a giant gap. And then like at the bottom, like there'll be no work available for newbies. Like that's kind of how my reaction to the coding was too. I was like, oh, this is really awesome for me because I know enough about code to make use of this tool. But somebody who's like coming in from the bottom, the jump they've got to make to like hit the first rung of the ladder just got a lot bigger.
Yeah. Like why would I pay you when I can get all that apprentice stuff I need for free? Yeah, it's pretty hard. And
right. And ChatGPT is going to do a better job at the apprentice level stuff. Like the stuff because when you're first learning how to code, like you're really bad. Like everybody is. And you're barely getting stuff to work. And so like ChatGPT is going to do 10 times better than average newbie who's still learning or who just went through some college courses. So like there's going to be a lot longer period between when you learn something roughly and when you're actually going to get paid for it. Where it used to be like, you could get paid at a basic level for just having some rudimentary knowledge for something like that. And I think the same thing's just going to happen across more industries now with AI.
Depressing.
It's a little depressing, but but on the other side of things, you're going to be able to have that we wouldn't have been able to have before. Like there's already been some major breakthroughs in health, biology and stuff because there's there's certain things that are so complicated. The data, I have had this problem. Maybe tell me how you view your health experience. I find that most of the time when I go to doctors, they just tell me it's some sort of itis and give me antibiotics. That is 90% of my doctor's experiences. It's very rare that they know the actual cause beyond, like, because itis just means inflamed, right? It's just like that thing, that part of your body's bigger than it should be. And then everything's an antibiotic. It's very rare, I feel like, the doctor knows exactly what's going on and has an actual targeted solution. That's how my experience with doctors
I paid you at least give me something with opium in it. At least just stop. Ibuprofen, I'm done.
That's what I was looking for. But I mean, do you know what I mean? Like, do you get the feeling a lot of times it's just kind of like, it's probably that, like it's not really like, it almost feels like a witch doctor sometimes, where it's just like, are you sure? Like, I don't get a lot of confidence from doctors.
I dread it. I really do, because it's they have, I don't want to say all of them, but there's definitely a certain level of like pretension because they had to go to school for so many years. And if you go to school for that many years, you're going to be really pissed off at anybody who questions you for that thing you went to school for 10 years.
Sure. I kind of understand why, because when you start looking into the variables, like as a programmer, I'm always trying to get people to narrow issues down. Mm-hmm. Like anybody who was interacting with me with on the forums, if they present a problem to me, like, all right, does it happen with just SS2 installed? Does it happen like on a clean save or on the existing save? Like, have all these questions. I'm just trying to narrow it down. And this is just like a game mod, which is, pretty inane thing. Now you're talking about the human body. Okay, well, now we got to worry about what you ate. How much sleep did you have? How much exercise did you get? Did you eat something you shouldn't have? How's caffeine affecting things? Do you smoke cigarettes? Do you smoke weed? Do you drink beer? Like all these different variables. And then then the doctor's trying to ask the patient, like, all right, I need you to control for these things. They can't trust you to do that. Like how often does the doctor tell you, okay, you got to cut sugar out, and how many of you actually do, right?
Yeah.
So like the doctor's job is really, really challenging. And just for somebody to analyze the data about the human body and figure out what variables are impacting the results like that it's impossible. It's not, so we try and do like large scale trials and like hope the statistics work out the issues, but clearly we've hit some brick walls there. Like there's certain diseases and stuff that have been with humans forever. And where now like AI is able to sift through that data and find those patterns. People won't be able to chew through enough data or will miss things because, while we're good at pattern finding, finding micro patterns, that come across big data sets is not something that humans are really good at. That's something where computers can do that we can't.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of those asinine things that you just you can't have a doctor sit every time you go to the bathroom and be like, all right, let's take a look. Like it just, AI would be perfect, AI toilets and stuff like that. It's a creepy thought, but at the same time, that really, it is nice to have that kind of private health thing, and you can kind of take it upon yourself to gather data and present your case to a doctor at least and be like, hey, these are the things that are happening. Here's the test I was able to do by myself.
There's a startup trying to do like a sensor that you install on your tooth, and it's like just like a little chip that basically would just, I don't know if it gets embedded into your tooth or if it's like temporarily glued there or whatever, but basically it can, like, based on your chewing, it can monitor like what substances you're consuming, and it can get a rough approximation of like everything you consume, so that you would have like you could figure out how many calories you're consuming and how many of each vitamin and everything, so that you can have a rough approximation of what you ate without having to track.
Right.
And like, man, the amount of like the potential of that would be massive when combined with something like AI to analyze all that and look for patterns and stuff.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Except, half of people are going to be like, I'm not letting Jeff Bezos take over my mind.
That's where the younger generation always steps in and takes care of that. Like, younger me, like 20 years ago, if somebody said, I'll put a chip in you and you won't have to carry a wallet around, I'd have been like, sign me up. Now I'm like, that is creepy. I'm not doing that. But
true.
When you're young and naive, like the Elon Musk brain implants, that's the young man's game. There are teenagers out there very hype about that, so they'll get over all the fears that are coming that the rest of us are like, eh. But that's the same thing with AI too. I think there's probably a generational divide there. There's probably a lot of young people who are just like all on board, like, oh yeah, this is going to be like this is going to be absolutely incredible, whereas, and then the rest of us are over here talking about, oh, those poor voice actors are going to be out of job, and the young people are like, they don't probably thinking like, oh my god, my characters are going to be able to talk to me for real.
Right.
And
exactly.
I kind of get that. I still have a little bit of that feel too. It's just like but then I also have seen enough to know that like, oh, but that's you're killing off some of the human element here.
So Starfield vehicles, I talked to Flashy Joe 2 weeks ago about it. He gave a pretty good answer about adding in vehicles if it would be hard to do on a Starfield Bethesda engine. But I didn't really get into like subatmospheric flight, because I know that's another thing that people would be really into, is just being able to fly around on the planet. Do you think that's possible on a creation built engine?
So I think that now that they've like opened Pandora's box with the vehicles, I think that the engine is going to be capable of doing all vehicle types. In fact, I would not be shocked if that is one of their intentions with DLC, of being like, this is going to introduce land vehicles. This is going to introduce, like, we're going to get 3 or 4 big DLC out of this. And so they'll have saved some number of things. Like, think about how complex and advanced the bot system is in Automatron. Automatron kind of gets reamed as like, oh, that was kind of a rip-off DLC, but it's like, no, it wasn't. There was like, that added like the customability of those bots, like, is technologically wonderful. Added a whole new power level for modders and stuff we could do. And I think that we'll see some of that same stuff. There's some obvious like things they didn't do in Starfield, and like, we got this crazy feature list, right? That Starfield Direct was like, what? We get all that?
Yeah.
Then there's gonna be some number of those things, of systems that they started on, or like obvious points of like the low-hanging fruit of like, oh, we could do this too. And I think vehicles are one, because obviously you got a whole planet to traverse. It will make it much faster in a vehicle. And then this,
I was thinking mechs.
And mechs are the other one, yeah, because there's in some of those videos, there's like smoking husks of mechs. So clearly they were a thing in that timeline. And it's like, it seems like they're trying to hit all the sci-fi tropes, right? Like, we had a planet for each of them. Like, it was like, here's the like Star Trek planet, here's the Tatooine planet, here's your cyberpunk planet. Like, you had one for every subgenre of sci-fi. So now we need to have mech warrior. Where's the mech warrior representation? So yeah, I think definitely we'll get full-on vehicles. I think we'll get land vehicles. I think they already said that they have simulated gravity and physics on each planet. So obviously the engine's capable of varying those. So you apply that to an individual object level, boom, you got yourself some working vehicles. So yeah, I think we're gonna get full vehicle support in Creation Kit finally.
Do you think the limitation to it was as more of the moving beat across and loading an FPS? Do you think that's
absolutely.
Why they held back?
They've said as much. So there's an interview, Todd Howard talks about horses in Skyrim, and this wasn't an interview he did about Skyrim. It was about their games in general. I think this was the interview he did with what's his name? He's like Lex Friedman. He did an interview with Lex Friedman. I think they were talking about this. Really good interview. I highly recommend it if you're a fan of Bethesda games. And he was talking about how the reason that they they don't put a lot of focus on the horses is because the engine can't load fast enough. So the horse had to be super limited in its speed. And so, yeah, that is definitely a concern. But the fact that they're rendering out whole planets now and that we're on such, like the hardware now we have, like you look at just like a base, even an Xbox One S, like the power level it has is nuts compared to what they had in Fallout 4 when they were building it. Right. So yeah, I think that we're getting to a point, and this is something with when Unreal Engine 5 launched and they showed virtualized geometry. That was like such a mind-blowing game changer in the industry of like, oh my God, that changes everything. Like poly count doesn't matter anymore. I doubt Creation Engine has that. They weren't close enough to it, but that's next. Like, so but basically what that represented was that we have reached the pinnacle where graphic fidelity is no longer a blocker. There's now like everything can look amazing. Everything can render infinitely. So even if we don't get that in Starfield, we will get it in the next, Creation Engine 3 will have to get there. We'll have to get, Bethesda's always been a little bit behind on the graphics pipeline, but the rest of the industry is reaching the end, right? So eventually Bethesda will catch up to them and they will be at the end too. So even if we don't have that full capability out of the box in Starfield, modders will add it in with script extenders and stuff, and then the next game or the game after that will get there, and we'll have full parity with the rest of the game industry.
Awesome. So that's a yes out there, guys. It's vehicles will make us way, and I knew they would one way, just probably not super speeders.
I mean, if you go look at the vehicle capability of New Vegas, it is mind-blowing thanks to mod authors. For whatever reason, we've never gotten that in Fallout 4, which is one of the reasons that I think one of the things that shakes my confidence in Fallout 4's longevity is the fact that we have not attracted the super script extender wizards to come and like create crazy back-end frameworks. Yeah, because usually like when a game's like that kind of, like Skyrim has it, New Vegas has it, where there's just like you can basically do anything now with all these frameworks that are available. And we've got some really good frameworks in Fallout 4, but nothing at the script extender level that they do in those two games. And maybe it'll still come. Maybe I'm just misremembering timelines, and maybe those came a lot later in the lives of those other games, but I don't think so. I think by now we should have seen some of that stuff happen in Fallout 4, and it hasn't. So I think Fallout 4 doesn't have quite the committed hardcore fan base as those other games.
Yeah, you could kind of see it by the forum opposed to like Skyrim.
Well, and I kind of get it. It's less of the general consensus about Fallout 4 and what people dislike, I think, is that you have too much of a backstory as a character. You're not enough of a blank slate, and so it's harder to role play from the beginning, from the opening intro. Whereas and you don't have that. And it's so funny is you don't even there's also the opposite complaint of that you don't have enough backstory. That's my complaint. Like, I'm happy to be a character. Like, I love Mass Effect. I love being Shepard. I love Witcher. I love being Geralt. But Bethesda kind of found this like sad medium that's not satisfying for either player base, where you're like character with a background, but you don't get enough time with that background to like fall in love with the characters, right? Like, you don't get enough time with Sean and your spouse to like care about them. So then like the moment when you lose them falls flat.
And that's just kind of the develop, because when you're playing Geralt, like you said, I mean, you want to be a Witcher. Right. You want to be freaking Geralt. Bethesda's always been like, I want to make myself a badass. I want to create this character a badass. So I think that's what kind of jarring about, as you said, kind of that middle ground.
Yeah, they didn't lean one way or the other hard enough. And I think that was that's one of Fallout 4's failings. But I think for the sake of like most Bethesda players, they're in it for that blank slate character. And we can do that with mods, but still it's I don't know. I don't know why that hasn't taken off, right? Maybe it's that the alternate start mods aren't good enough. I don't know. I haven't played with many of them.
It's really hard because there's so many dialogues that are connected, so much of the story.
Yeah, that's another hard part that we run into all the time. And thank God our writers have powered through. Player lines are super limited. So you're either forced to go player lineless or use a mod to make it so you need less player lines, and then your stuff feels disconnected from the base game.
I think there's more bandit lines.
It's harder to write force too. So then you end up with less story mods. That also discourages probably, because I think this is the thing where I couldn't answer that. I'm just guessing because I don't. Maybe from doing these casts and stuff. Have you talked to many systems modders from any of these other games? Because it would be interesting to know if like what drew them. I would be really curious to watch like some interviews with people who make those crazy physics mods in New Vegas or Skyrim of like what drew them to putting in that Herculean effort to do that.
Yeah, I talked to one. It was one of my first, but it wasn't. It was just he answered questions, so it wasn't live like this. He's the one who did the back end for the body slide.
Oh yeah, that's a ton of work. Jeez.
Yeah, and he just And what I found from him is those kind of like back end modders, they're just really super into the code. They're not really into the game. They
Oh,
really
okay. So they like the
enjoy.
game enough, but they enjoy the code. Okay.
Yeah, they really want to see
Yeah.
how what they can do with the code. So it's pretty interesting because I mean that's not how I work at all. I barely I can touch fragments as far as code goes, but yeah, I think it's just kind of their drive is they love to see like making that system as polished as possible, and that's rare, as you said. If you don't get those people into a game, it's a hard trek.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I mean, that's kind of what drew me to start with pushing more features into the game. Like when I went from salvage beacons to sim settlements, like it was like, oh, there's enough of an audience, I can keep doing this. And then it was like, all right, what can I make this engine do? Like,
Yeah.
what can I? So I kind of get that draw.
I mean,
too.
how many
That makes
coders
sense.
are on sim settlements? You and Pra or?
Yeah, now it's we've had others in the past. We had Baron did most of the HQ system, and I get advice from some people. But yeah, mostly I do all the Papyrus scripting, and Prod does all of our Xedit scripting. Yeah, it's pretty much.
Yeah, it's hard to find you guys. Everybody wants to be the writer or the voice actor.
Well, I think there are a lot of other coders that like would be happy to work on mods, but I think one of the things where I think coders, I think we're all natural bit of control freaks. So like we want it all to go our way. It's like, well, we have control we control the vehicle down at the bottom level, so we get to decide what can happen and what can't. So I think I find at least that there are more arguments, like intense arguments between coders than there are between most creatives that I've worked with.
Yeah, that does make sense. Different parts of the brain. Let's say you don't have to think about the people making the mods, of course, or when we're going to get CK or anything. Let's just say day one it releases. What mod would you want day one? Just anything.
I don't know. Because usually like the day one mods that come out tend to be, I guess the day one mods tend to be pretty trashy. But some of the earlier ones that came out for Fallout that were good were like the ones that just like got rid of limitations. So I'll hope for some of those. Like I'm gonna immediately want an unlimited workshop mod. I saw that they had the workshop build limit in there, the bane of all of our existence. I hope day one there's a remover for that, because I am 100% going to spend, as soon as I get my first outpost in Starfield, I'm going to spend the rest of my day there trying to figure out like what can I do in here that we couldn't do in Fallout 4.
I wrote that question for you guys to like relax and enjoy. Every time, every mod author is like, oh yeah, I would love to have like, I don't know, Xedit day one. And it was like, no, just something fun.
Well, it's hard. Well, I think if like when we know the engine so well, it's automatically like, all right, what new toys am I going to get when I finally get to mod it? Like, for example, if the console is available immediately, which I think it will be, but maybe not. Maybe it'll be something that you got to put an INI change or something and someone will have to figure out to unlock. Like I'm immediately going to be like playing in workshop mode, clicking on things in the console and then trying the commands I know. Like, hey, is this linked with a keyword, or does this have active values? Like I'm going to be I just won't be able to help myself because I'm so like into their engine and it's become such a part of my life that like curiosity is going to be almost as fun as the curiosity of finding out what happens in the game.
Yeah, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. I mean, that's the whole reason you guys are doing these and authoring and taking on, thousands of hours of work is because you enjoy playing around and see what you can get away with in the engine.
Yeah. So it's like that. Like I said, creating games became the game for me at some point. Like I still enjoy playing games, and I still will, I'll play Starfield and enjoy it, and I still play Fallout and enjoy it. I still play our own. Like I play one of the things that I've done in the last 2 chapters with Sim Settlements too is I don't read through all of the scripts, because then I can actually like play some of the quests for real and be like, oh my god, that was great writing, or oh, I didn't expect that twist, so I can still get some enjoyment out of it. But like once you know how the sausage is made, then part of the fun becomes, wow, I don't know how I would do that. And there's still a couple of mysteries out there that I've stumbled across where I don't understand how mod authors have done it. Even after pulling apart their stuff, I'm like, I still don't understand how this works. And that's exciting stuff to see. So I imagine that feeling times 10 every time we get a new game out of Bethesda.
Yeah, I had a corner Flashy Joe till he finally said, I want a dog.
Yeah, I guess we didn't see pets in there, did we? We just saw some robots, and
I think we saw a picture of a cat.
And like I think somebody had a goldfish on the beach. Like that was something I saw. But yeah, I didn't see dog meat in space. Yeah, a dog would be cool. Dog would be awesome. As some sort of pet would be cool.
Kids, I didn't even see kids, did I?
I saw one in the live action trailer. They were pushing our emotional buttons on that one.
Yeah, that was a good one. That was really good, actually. Yeah, it looked so clean that it looked like an animation.
Yeah, it gave me it reminded me of how a lot of the new Star Wars shows work. So I wonder if they filmed it in one of those volumes. Have you seen all that tech?
Hmm.
That gave me that vibe where everything was in like a real small set, but also super believable in that space, like where it looked like everybody was actually in that scene.
Yeah, yeah, it was really well done. Amazing how much work probably went into that for 2 minutes.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, like you said, that's why I said trailers are one of those magical things to me. You put in like this crazy amount of effort for the shortest possible little thing with the goal of like selling somebody something else. It's a little bit magic.
Yeah, problem is sometimes they do too well, and you watch the movie and you're like, those are all the good parts.
Oh yes, yeah. They tell you the whole plot in the trailer. Yeah, that's awful. And then the other side of it, and I was worried we did. There's another sin with trailers, and I was worried we did it with the latest trailer of like sell you something and you're not getting fully, of
Mhm.
like it's too cool, like it doesn't look close enough to what we're actually delivering.
Yeah,
You know, like some trailers will show you such cool moments all packed together that you get this vibe of like, oh, I'm gonna be playing this crazy action thing. But I think we actually, like, after playing through the last quest in chapter 3, I'm like, okay, we delivered on it. Like that's really all, like we really, SAG did such an amazing job with the final quest. It really plays out awesome.
and there's so many new mechanics to it and so many things going on that I don't think you could really ruin it in that type, especially as a settlement type mod, like because you're about building and taking things longevity. It usually doesn't sell itself too well as a trailer.
Well, I mean, well, now it doesn't look like you're building any, like no one would know that that's a settlement
That's
mod.
right. I
Looking
guess
at our
so, yeah.
trailers, our trailers are all in on the story aspect.
That's right.
Yeah. In fact, like when we were originally pitching to do the first trailer with Pontus, he's like, well, let's, like, I was telling him, like, I want to show this and this about the building stuff. He's like, why don't we do 2 trailers? We'll do a story trailer and then you can do another trailer that's all gameplay. And then we never produced the gameplay trailer because it's harder to make that. Going in workshop mode and placing plots does not make for good trailer bait.
Well, hey, thank you, Gath. I really appreciate you taking the time. I also really appreciate you taking the time and teaching me how the CK works.
You know, there's plenty more to learn.
Oh, I got plenty, yeah. But I mean, like so far, way better than I was 6 months ago.
There you go.
All right, Kinggath, thank you. Have a great rest of the night.
Thank you too.
Huh? That was a pretty good episode to end on, right? As I said, link down below. Go check out the rest of those podcasts. The only thing bad about it is that he has no longer any more time to do them. But maybe if you go in there and show him some love, he can be convinced to do it. Although you'd probably take all my subscribers, so, I would take the hit. It is really good information. It is a really good podcast. Hey, and on that, if you do like this type of content and you want to see me keep asking mod authors what they're doing, what they're up to, what mods they're working on, please go ahead and like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now onwards, what am I doing after Starfield comes? I'm sure there's a lot of YouTube channels on right now that are thinking about the exact same thing. I can only imagine all the news YouTube Starfield channels where they're going off to. I don't know how many beginner guides we're going to get, but it's going to be more than a handful. But for me, I will be obviously playing the game. On August 31st, 5 p.m. Pacific time, I will be here streaming probably all weekend. Not straight, of course. I still have to eat and sleep and do those boring basic human needs. But after that, I will be reaching out to mod authors to get their impressions. Of course, if they have any ideas or they're kind of wrapping around certain things that intrigue them, I would love to be able to pass that information on to you guys. I'm also going to get into lore a little bit. Now, don't worry, I'm not going and explaining all the details of the universe. I am going into my other passion, which is narration. So I'm going to find all the books without anybody speaking anything, and I'm going to find them and narrate them and make a couple YouTube videos, just kind of creating my own audio library of the lore of Starfield. If you guys are into that, I may expand a little bit on it, but this is mostly going to be a modding YouTube channel. I'm not trying to step on Juicehead's territory either. Mine is specifically more the mod authors. And of course, I will be playing and showing their mods when they start pushing them out. But I'm not going to be doing daily mod uploads. I just don't have the time or energy. Juicehead, please take it away. I am more than happy to see what you got going on. Now we step into a little different territory of what I normally do. But the reason I got into sim settlements was to learn how to do dialogue, learn how to work the CK, kind of take on bigger dialogue trees, so that I can make my own companion mod and something more than just a companion mod. Not saying there's anything wrong with just companion mods, but I kind of have a vision for where I would like this to go. If you're interested in seeing where that possible mod develops and be a part of creating ideas and playing around, well, come join the Discord. I have nothing official. I just wanted to put it out there that as soon as the game starts, I'm going to start writing and start conceptualizing and putting my mouth to the CK. That is not what I meant to say. Putting my mouth where the money is, that doesn't make sense either. Practicing what I preach. Yeah, let's go with that one. That sounds like the safest idiom I could come up with. Anyway, guys, as always, thank you so much again for this run 6 months before Starfield. It's been amazing. As always, stay safe and mod reckless.